The news about former Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax and his wife, it was just a total shock. So how does a story this complex, this sensitive, even get reported? That's what we're going to do here. We're going to break down all the layers of information, starting with those first police reports and digging into the deeper, much more painful context surrounding this awful tragedy.
You really have to see this story as existing in two totally different worlds. You've got the bright lights of public life, where a political career basically imploded, and then there's the incredibly private, closed-door reality of a family in a deep, deep crisis. To really get what happened, you have to see how those two worlds just violently crashed into each other.
Okay, so pretty much every news report you'll see about this starts right here, with this incredibly stark, official, and just devastating conclusion from law enforcement. This quote from the police chief, that's the anchor. It's the undisputed fact that everything else is built on.
All right, so let's start at the beginning, with that first layer, the official account. You know, whenever a big story like this breaks, the first reports you hear, they're always built around what the police say at their press briefing. It really is the foundation, right? It's the what happened that creates that first draft of the story.
So the police laid out a really clear step-by-step timeline. It starts with that 911 call from their son, then the awful discovery of Cerina Fairfax in the basement and Justin Fairfax upstairs, which leads to that official conclusion, murder-suicide. This timeline, this becomes the basic skeleton of all the initial news coverage.
And it's here that the police start to, very cautiously hint at a motive. And you really got to pay attention to the words they use. They call it a domestic dispute and say the divorce papers were a possible spark. This is really our first official peek into the why behind it all, even though, it's still just a very early theory. So to get a deeper story than just what the police say, what do reporters do? They turn to public records. And in this situation, court documents from the divorce proceedings, they add this absolutely crucial and very personal layer of context. This is really the moment where that private struggle begins to leak out into the open.
And wow, these records, they paint a picture of a marriage that was just completely broken. You have Cerina Fairfax's side, where she describes him as emotionally withdrawn, even calling him a deadbeat. And then you have the hard facts from the court. A judge had just awarded her custody of the kids, and he was ordered to be out of the house. All of a sudden, that police term, domestic dispute, it takes on a much, much heavier and more tragic weight, doesn't it?
Sometimes it's just one single detail in a court filing that tells you so much. And this fact right here, it's just chilling. He bought a handgun back in 2022 using money that was supposed to be for his children's horseback riding lessons. Now, the documents do mention he did this partly because he'd lost his state security detail after leaving office. But looking back now, it's just a deeply, deeply disturbing part of this whole story.
And you can see just how much things were escalating from this next detail. See, Fairfax himself had actually called the police back in January, claiming his wife had assaulted him. But here's the thing. There was camera footage, and it showed the assault never occurred. Officials could actually verify his claim was false. I mean, that's just a really stark example of the level of conflict happening inside that house.
Okay, so the scope of this story absolutely explodes when we add the next layer, because this wasn't just a private family tragedy, right? It involved a very well-known public figure. And that public interest angle, that's why this became a huge national story. It pulls years and years of political history right into the middle of this current tragedy.
This timeline really shows you that public journey, that arc, so clearly. I mean, he was once considered a political rising star, right? He gets elected to the #2 job in all of Virginia. But then just a year into his term, his whole career is completely turned upside down by these really serious allegations. And honestly, he never really recovered from it politically. This whole trajectory, it's the essential backdrop for what the police chief called his fall from grace.
So, any responsible reporting on Justin Fairfax has to bring up the 2019 sexual assault allegations that really stopped his political career in its tracks. It's absolutely crucial to lay out the claims from both Meredith Watson and Vanessa Tyson. And it's just as important to include his side of the story, his strong denials, and his insistence that the encounters were consensual. This whole chapter is just inseparable from who he was as a public figure.
And this quote from the police chief, man, it just perfectly sums up why this story got so much attention. He flat out calls it high profile and a fall from grace. It's that collision, right? The private tragedy smashing into public status. That's what makes this a major national news story.
But after we peel back all these layers, the police reports, the court records, the political history, we have to come back to what is truly the most important part of this story,
The devastating human cost, especially for the ones left behind. And this is without a doubt the most heartbreaking detail of all. The fact that their two teenage kids, both high school students, were actually in the home when this unimaginable tragedy happened. We know that victim services are helping them now, but it's just this awful reminder of the innocent lives that have been completely and forever changed by this.
And of course, the shockwaves are being felt all through their community. You see a statement like this one from former Governor Ralph Northam, who was his running mate, and it really shows you that sense of just disbelief and grief among people who knew the family in a totally different way, as colleagues, as people serving the public together.
Look, this story brings up some incredibly difficult and painful themes, so it's really important for us to end by sharing some resources. If you or anyone you know is struggling with anything we've talked about here, please know that there is help out there. You can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, and you can also contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
So in the end, a story like this, it's like a really complex and painful mosaic, right? It's pieced together from all these different parts, police statements, court filings, a really troubled public history. And it leaves us with a really difficult question to wrestle with. When the headlines fade away, how do we even begin to reconcile the public person we thought we knew with the private reality of such a violent, tragic end? There are just no easy answers here.